So I'm here to talk about some of the theory put into practice that Ashley talked about by looking at our unified subject index. But before I go there, let me tell you a little bit about EBSCO so you have some context if you don't already have it. So EBSCO is an aggregator of published content, and we provide our own databases for the subscriber. We also, this is just a partial list, by the way. We have an EBSCO discovery service. Now, the discovery service is it searches things that you may license from EBSCO. It also reaches into your local catalogs if you're a library. It reaches into your institutional repository. The data doesn't have to be hosted on EBSCO for it to go there. So it provides sort of a one-stop shop to get into all of the content that a library offers its users. We offer research databases, proprietary, created by us, or licensed, and full-text versions. And then we offer an ebooks collection package, several packages, which house over 700,000 books. And then we offer journal and e-package services. Some of the figures I thought would be nice to go over is we have 115 plus licensed databases. It's funny when every company has their own acronyms, and EBSCO is no different. I mean, the name EBSCO is an acronym. When I first got there, they started calling these things LSDs, and I was like, wow, this company is really open-minded. But then I came down to earth, and it's actually licensed secondary databases. So it's kind of funny being in conversations when you see people coming into the company and this terminology gets flown around. We have 350 full-text databases, so those are databases where we make an effort to link in the content right there in the database so it doesn't go out to somewhere else. Users can find it in there. And also the ebooks, they are visible in the same platform. So you can search your whole collection, go to journal articles, go to your ebooks, all there in the same platform. And we have over 300,000 databases, catalogs, and institutional repositories. We also do thousands of updates every day. I'm involved in a sliver of that, so the main takeaway from here is that there's a lot of content, and a lot of this content is hosted by EBSCO, but it uses data from the providers. So you can see on the right there, we've got some of the product banners. ATLA, for example, that's a licensed secondary database where it's a repository or a collection for theological content. PsycInfo, psychology, etc. We have Medline for Mesh or PubMed content. So the main takeaway here is that there are a lot of databases that we host, and they each have their own set of data that we use. So I wanted to go from that and then mention that EBSCO, we are really keen on using the subject index for all the reasons that we've been talking about here. Some aggregators rely more on full text, where you run into a bunch of problems, where you get messy language, ambiguous language, you get issues of polysemy, synonymy, which doesn't really help. It's very ambiguous in the language. It's kind of like doing a search and hoping you land somewhere. If you search Hamlet, for example, on suicide, it's up to, you're just running against what the text is there. So you get things that, lead to ambiguity. And for example, I have an example here, depression is it mental health, geological. You can't really tell by the label itself. So we really favor the use of the subject index in terms of retrieving content. It's a collection of terms that cover the scope of a collection's content. So think of it as a web that enshrines basically all of the scope of the content. And you can use this web to pick into various portions of it. And subject indexes sort of act as sort of mini discovery services that allow the user to navigate. But so the problem we ran into at EBSCO was, well, if we rely heavily on subject indexes, and each index is tailored to suit the content of that particular database, well then how do you solve this problem where one set of terms that applies for one content set may not be the same set of terms that applies to a different content set, and you have different areas of domain. You've got science, you've got psychology, you've got theology. How do you get through all that? And so I just wanted to put up a couple of screenshots. So this is a screen capture of a record from Medline showing its use of mesh terms, so medical subject headings. Here we have the term food, comma, genetically modified. So notice it's got the noun front-loaded and then the adjectival stuff after a comma. It's sort of inverted. No one would speak this way in natural language and say, give me stuff on genetically modified foods. So, but this is nevertheless the way Medline talks about this kind of content in the subject index. This is an example of food science and technology abstracts where it does it the other way around. Genetically engineered foods. So notice it's not modified anymore, it's engineered. It's plural. Was the other one singular? Yeah, food, and so foods. So you have basically two labels that were created for their specific content set that don't match, and they mean the same thing. This is not a problem of these two databases, but it's overarching. We find this problem all the time with different subject indexes that tag the content in this specific database that they're used for. So to look at an example, this is a word cloud of that concept with these different labels. The size of each label here is the frequency with which it's used within a particular subject index. There's 17 different labels. So you've got genetically engineered foods, GM foods, transgenic foods, gene spliced foods, gene altered foods. How do you keep track of all this stuff? If you've got, one vocabulary might do a good job of creating used fors, non-preferred terms that lead you to the right preferred term, but altogether you're not going to gather all the labels that you can talk about this thing. Here's another example of electronic commerce. We've got internet shopping, web retailing, e-commerce, e-business, internet commerce. The problems that result from different labels is that when you're doing a multi-database search, how do you harmonize the 10 or 100 whatever vocabularies that you're trying to leverage to get more precise results? How do you use all the separate sort of labels, the collections of labels to get at the same idea? And it's not just about that people, like Ashley mentioned, people are used to coming to Google or using their strategies for Google searching in more curated sets of content. They're doing that, but the users are also coming, they may be really familiar with a certain domain. They may be really familiar with mesh and know how to use that vocabulary. But when you're doing a multi-database search, what good is it if that vocabulary isn't used throughout all of the content? So you're kind of sort of missing connections is the big challenge here. And so how do you fix that? Well, you make the connections. It's pretty simple. So what we did was we looked at where food, comma, genetically modified is the same thing as genetically engineered foods. We mapped those together under a concept for that thing. So a concept, and we did that for a lot of our database providers. So we have obviously our own labels. We have Medline's labels, we have FSTA labels, we have MLA labels, and they all sort of map to this concept. Now the cool thing about this is that people have been talking about concept versus term versus keyword. The difference between a concept and a label is that a concept is what you think about before you apply language to it. So it's language agnostic. When you start adding labels to it, that's how linguistic communities think of those concepts. And certain concepts can be particular to certain linguistic communities. So if you get this notion of a concept, which you can map all these labels to, then you start filling out the way structured vocabularies talk about this concept. And off to the right, we also have user search logs. So we look through our data on our search logs and see, well, how does the customer search this stuff? We want to get that stuff in there too. So we have filters of what's important in those search logs and what's not. We run through those and we look at that every now and then. So to take an example, and this is sort of the hub model that Ashley was talking about. This is just an example where a user will type in teaching aids, and there may be other keywords. So if you have all the labels that all these vocabularies talk about teaching aids mapped under a concept, we've given that concept a location for the search to target. And then from targeting that, then it gets expanded according to the preferred label on each database that's contributing. And it expands the search to retrieve more precise content from that database for a multi-database search. We have over 80% of our licensed database partners are participating, including just some of these lists here: MLA, PsycInfo, Atla, GeoRef, Social Work Abstracts, ERIC. And so it's a really cool thing. There are some important notes. One is that the USI helps semantics to EBSCO search. It's not the whole shebang. It's just an added feature that drives more precise content into your results. So we use it as I guess as a key ingredient to our secret sauce. It asserts control on structured and unstructured terms. So this is where you're grouping labels from how users search, from perhaps the natural language that they're using when they talk to Google, with the labels that controlled indexes use, and marrying that together to assert control under a concept umbrella. So it's kind of neat in that regard. I mean, the notion of a metathesaurus is not really new. I mean, these the UMLS version, the Unified Medical Library Systems. Thank you. A lot of acronyms to keep in your head. But this takes into account user search, so it's pretty new in that respect. The mappings are not visible, so what you see in each provider's record is how that provider has indexed that content. Nor do we, and I should have put it up here, but I didn't. I should have. We don't actually change any of the display or any of the indexing of that record itself. So this is sort of behind the scenes to marry and get the kind of content that the user wants into their result list. It's enabled as a default on EDS searching, so that type of searching where your search goes into multiple different data repositories in your institution. You can undefault it if you want, if you don't feel like it works. But by and large, we found that it does. And each contributing database can be tuned to the contribution to maximize the contribution of that particular vocabulary. So, for example, if one term set does a great job of explaining something, got a lot of use for us, and another is very slim, we try to maximize the most contribution of the data that gets into the USI. And it's called the enhanced search precision feature. So if you see like marketing literature on it, it's called that. The ESP, it's kind of nice. I'm magically getting into your mind. Not really. So this is just a screenshot of how it works. The person types in workplace injury, and you get a bunch of results. But the first two have subject terms, labels, that are different than the thing that got searched. So how does that work? Well, when you apply equivalent subjects as an enabled feature in your search, then it treats them, if they're mapped together, it treats them all the same, as it's the same concept. So it takes out, I mean, the cool thing is it takes out the ability for the searcher to decode the kind of vocabulary that's used for a particular product. But if people want to see this particular vocabulary that's used for a product, you can still see it there in the records. So, obviously this is great for people who don't go right to the thesaurus, browse in the product, and know how to be a super user and search the terms. Here's another screenshot of MLA, before we mapped MLA, we searched film industry before ESP enabled. 2 articles from MLA were in the top 50. But after we enabled it, it was 7 articles in the top 50, including number 5 and 7. So where we see this going is extending USI to scholarly publishers with the vocabularies. Because the more subject indexes we have contributing to this, the better we're going to be able to target or supply the information and the knowledge that the user wants when they do a search. It allows us to connect more fully to the people and the knowledge that they seek. So it's not just which label am I using, it's what's the concept these people are after. And also we see a great opportunity to expand this globally. EBSCO is a global company, provides for everybody, or people in different countries. So it's nice that the concept level is language agnostic and label reflects linguistic communities or search communities. And it's also flexible enough to include concepts that are region specific with no cross-linguistic equivalencies. I know Margie was talking about, it's not necessarily a translation of the label, it's more like a concept. How is the concept itself spoken about in different languages? So if, say, a concept is particular to certain languages, it's flexible enough to support that kind of thing. So we hope we've told you a bit about how EBSCO is using respectfully the subject indexes of our partners to basically meet both of our goals. That's get users to the content they desire. The next step is to take this further in the steps that we talked about. And if you have any question at all or want to get in touch, here's our email, LinkedIn details. Thanks.
As you break, you want to take one question or so as to get other things set up. Do we have any questions this time?
Yeah. Oops. Oh, do we have to? Oh, actually, get some questions.
Sorry, hi. I just wanted to know the concepts element of this. Is it you could have limitless concepts, and how many concepts do you assign, and do you name your concepts, or are they just concept 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 million?
Yeah, you can do either. So as far as how many concepts do you have in your own mind compared to what somebody else does, right? So that's essentially what we're doing. Concepts, just like language, are forever changing. So that's one reason that we have to keep monitoring and keep updating all the vocabulary and the mapping. So as far as
that's a constant process, that's what
Yep, it's a constant process. And as far as how do you label them, you can label the concepts if you want. More commonly used is just a unique identifier according to linked data practice, but either works.
Yeah, so like a number is great, because if it's unique, it's great for a computer to understand what it is. But if you got to label that, string can repeat across all your vocabularies. But it's helpful if a human looks at it and just wants to cruise through the concepts and look at it and see, well, what concepts do we have here in a way that I can understand.
Is there one more question? No. Okay, we will have time for questions at the end as well.